Once again, thank you for joining us today. This is Connor Jordan, and we've got Seth Davies, our managing partner, delivering a great session today called Reinventing Your Employee Performance Review Processes. Thanks again for joining us today, Seth. Go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Connor. Good morning, everyone. Let me welcome you to our session on employee review processes. The last several months, as I've been visiting our client sites and speaking with leaders and employees, the topic of employee performance reviews kept coming up, and it was a topic that a lot of people aren't fond of, and it's something that an exercise that's dreaded by both sides, by leaders and by employees. And as we come to the year end, this is, for many organizations, this is when the employee performance review happens, is during this time frame. And one of the things that I want to share with you is really creating a foundation for next year so that you can have more meaningful employee performance reviews, that it's not necessarily a paperwork exercise, but it's something that's got value for both sides to help the organization advance the business forward. A couple of things I'm going to talk about. Everything I talk about is the foundational elements of our leadership methodology called process-based leadership. And if you're interested in learning more about that, and you're going to be touch on different elements, but our website is process-based-leadership.com, where you can get a lot of good information, and all of our webinars that we do this year and last year are archived there. Let me share with you what I want to talk about today. I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about what I see and what my firm sees when it comes to employee reviews. But then we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about some foundational elements around communication styles, the need to set expectations with your employees, the need to absolutely have not only a feedback process, but a recognition process so employees know when they're doing the right behaviors and rewarding them with meaningful recognition, but then also talking about collecting data. And I remember the first performance review I ever gave an employee a long time ago. It didn't go very well, and the reason it didn't go very well is because I didn't have data to back up what I was telling this person. So we're going to wrap up at the end talking about how can I measure the level of engagement so I can truly have good data in giving a performance review to my employees. A couple of statistics I ran across last year, and I think they're still very relevant today, is 51% of U.S. workers think employee reviews are not an accurate appraisal of their work. But look at that last one. 24%, a quarter of the workforce, dread their annual review more than anything else. Because, frankly, the performance reviews really, many times, it's not an accurate snapshot of the performance of the employee. They're conducted annually. And typically what happens is if I'm doing a performance review for an employee, about 2 to 4 weeks in advance of that date, I'm beginning to think about it. Well, guess what? The employee's beginning to think about it as well. And so what's the employee doing 2 to 4 weeks in advance of their performance review? They're coming in early. They're staying late. They're sending emails from home. They're being much more collaborative and creative during their time frame because they know that's their manager, their leader, is looking at their work effort during that time. And once that performance review is over with, there's a collective sigh of relief, and they go back to perhaps being not very engaged in the business around that. The other thing that I see with performance reviews, they're not meaningful. They're not data-driven. And if you want to have data-driven performance reviews, you got to start tying it to the scorecard, and we've got a lot of webinars on scorecards, but you also have got to tie it to the action register. I'm going to talk about that later on to measure that level of engagement. Leaders don't like them, and employees certainly don't like going to them because they don't feel as if it's anything good is going to come out of that performance review. Creates tension and anxiety. Sometimes it becomes a he said, she said type thing where the leader says one thing, the employee thinks something else and expresses their opinion, creates tension in there, and it breaks down that relationship that they've built up. Many managers struggle to provide meaningful feedback. I had a manager a couple weeks ago say, I've got 13 people that report to me. That means 13 performance reviews, and frankly, I have a hard time coming up with something different for each employee around that. Many leaders, they're just focused on checking the box, getting them done. Some leaders even copy and paste from 2 years ago to put it in to do that. So what I want to talk about is foundationally, how can we have better performance reviews? So we're going to talk about processes going forward. Connor had mentioned to you at the outset, folks, that we'll be doing polls to engage you and kind of learn a little bit more about your workforce and about you. So, Connor, if you would launch our first poll of the day around the effectiveness of the current employee review process.
Okay, we'll go about 10 more seconds here and then share the results. All right. And here you go. And Seth, I'm surprised nobody said 4 or 5 here, but 53% kind of in the middle. Gets the job done, but definitely could be a better process.
Interesting. Well, thanks, Connor. Let's talk about what needs to be fixed and talk about the timing. And what I like to see is I don't want to see a once annually discussion about performance. I recommend, and I like to see leaders and employees meeting together every 4 to 6 weeks and talking about performance and giving feedback real time around that. And whether it's a cup of coffee or it's lunch together or breakfast, meet with your employees on a more frequent basis to talk about the behaviors that they're exhibiting that you like, provide them recognition on that, but then also, you know, if there's behaviors they need to change, provide feedback. And we're going to talk on both of those later on about recognition and feedback. Another thing is the consistency across the organization. Organizations use the same form, but the application of that varies widely across the organization. And then the clarity. There's not the performance baselines, and that ties back to the scorecard. They're not clear. And then the expectations aren't clear. And we're going to talk in a minute about behavioral expectations and the need to set those. So what I want to do going forward, folks, is I want to share with you 5 steps, 5 foundational elements to reinvent that performance review process so that next year, whether you're giving the performance review at the employee's anniversary hire date, whether it may be June 26th or it's at the end of the year like many organizations, you've got data and you've got the ability to give a performance review that will be value added to the organization. And one of the first things that I want to see leaders doing is I want to see them and their team having an interpersonal communication process. And what I mean by that is assessing everyone's communication style. And let me be very clear and upfront by saying what I'm about to share with you, this is not a personality tool. This is a communication style assessment, and it's a 50-question survey that we have here at Competitive Solutions where you identify and understand people's individual communication style preferences. We all have a communication style preference, and that is in how we like to give information, but also how we like to receive information. And by having a communication style preference assessment, we can improve working relationships. And when I teach this in companies, there's a lot of ahas that take place. And people say, oh, now I understand why Michael is real short and quick to the point. Or now I understand when I talk to Jamie how she likes to ask a lot of questions about my family and my friends and have that small talk. So it's very eye-opening for folks. And people now, before where they would take offense at the way that someone's speaking with them, now they understand it's their communication style preference with that. Great teams have a mix of all styles. There are 4 styles I'm going to share with you. Every individual has got a blend of those 4 styles. You've got a dominant style within the organization or within your self. Leaders allow them to flex. And what I mean by flex is if I'm a leader of a team and I'm going to interface with Paul, I can look up in the team handbook and see Paul's communication style preference, and I can flex to meet his needs. If I'm going to go speak with Kathy, I can see what her communication style preference is, and I can flex to work with her so that we have better working relationships around that, better communication understanding. As a leader, I can engage everyone based on their styles. And then when I provide recognition and when I provide feedback, I know the best way that's going to create that win-win, not only for me as the leader, but for the employee on that. So let me share with you the 4 communication styles, and I could spend half a day going over each one of these. But the 4 of them, the first one is the driver. And let me give you an example of a driver. A driver is a person that is very quick, very deliberate. And a driver is someone that when you call them, they may say, how can I help you? They want to get right to the point. They want a bulletized briefing of the information. They're very quick to make a decision. Whether it's right or wrong, they're very quick to make a decision. And sometimes they can be seen as not caring, not understanding, and that's not true. It's just their communication style preference. Very quick, very deliberate. The next one is the analytic. The analytic is a person that needs lots of information to make a decision, that's going to take time, that's going to review everything thoroughly. When you're working with an analytic, you've got to absolutely give them a deadline. And so when you walk into an analytics office, you say, here's the information. I'd like for you to take a look at it, and I'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock for a decision. So analytic wants all the data as it relates to what you're talking to them about. Next person is the relator. The relator is very much about relationships. The relator is the one that is going to ask you questions about how is your weekends, how's your family. Before you break into the business aspect, you need to build that relationship with the relator by asking those questions around about them. And then the fourth one is the expressive. The expressive is the person that's very outgoing, likes to be the life of the party, likes to tell jokes, likes to have a lot of fun. Every person, and I've been doing this survey for 18 years, every person has got elements of each one of these. But the key is one of these is going to be their dominant style. So when you go to interface with them, it's very helpful to understand what's the dominant style of Linda, what's the dominant style of Michael, Joe, and so forth. So then you can go and be prepared to have a win-win discussion. Connor, if you would launch our second poll, I want to get a sense from our audience which communication style they view as their preference.
All right, about 10 more seconds for you. Okay. And here are the results, Seth. And again, another bit of a surprise to me. Not one person answered as an expressive, but typically what you see is a real good mix of all the different styles here.
I'm confident, Connor, we have some expressives on our webinar today. We shared the survey with them, that we certainly would find those. Next foundational element, folks, the behavioral expectations. And this is a key component of our methodology of process-based leadership, and the need to have agreed-upon expectations of how we're going to work together. Because think about it, at the end of the day, what's the only thing you have in common with the people you work with? It's the business. So we need to have expectations in place so we set aside our differences to have a better working relationship. And the expectation will serve as a foundation for feedback, for recognition. It creates a dialogue on the team regarding the commitments that everyone must make to support a truly high-performance organization. So there's 3 key questions in setting behavioral expectations. The way this exercise works when I teach it is I do a little briefing around the need to set behavioral expectations, but then I have the leader take a piece of flip chart paper, leave the room, and I have him or her come up with what are the things that I expect of my team. And while that's taking place, the team stays behind in the room, and they discuss what does we expect of our leader. And once those 2 exercises are done, I bring everybody back together, and then I flip chart out what do the team members expect of each other? How are we going to have good working relationships? And this is a very powerful tool. And many times in process-based leadership, this is one of the most difficult ones because we start talking about feelings and people around that, but it's very beneficial for that. A couple things, you've got to be specific when defining the behaviors. And one of the questions I like to ask is, how will I know if I'm meeting the expectations? How will I know if I'm meeting that expectation? We need to definitely, we got to focus on the future, not on the past. And there's some organizations, they've got historians will say, well, 20 years ago this happened. I use the phrase, from this day forward, how are we going to work together? Expectations are position-specific, not person-specific. So when you're setting the expectations of a leader, it's not about John as the leader of our team. Because if John wins the lottery tomorrow and he decides not to show up, we have a new leader, nothing's going to change. It's the expectations of the person in that position, not the expectations of the person with that personality. Expectations are position-specific, not person-specific. There's no right or wrong number of expectations. I've seen some teams where A lot of drivers, very straightforward. They say, hey, we got 5 expectations. There's other teams that may have 25 expectations of the leader, and the leader may have 35 expectations. Once developed, they've got to be reviewed for agreement. So everyone has to agree to those. Everyone wants to understand those expectations. And then the next component is those expectations are placed in the team handbook. And I believe every team needs to have, whether it's a virtual handbook where there's documents stored on a server or it's an actual 3-ring binder, there needs to be in that team handbook a copy of the expectations that they have of each other, along with their scorecard, their action register, and their communication strategy. They all need to be in that handbook. But then, to take it a step further, I want every team member to sign that document, symbolically showing that they agree to the expectations that are put in place around that. And then expectations need to be reviewed every 90 to 120 days. There needs to be the discussion around the expectations. Do we need to add any expectations? How are we doing against the stated expectations? Are there any expectations that maybe we need to remove from our handbook? So that's the key component around setting those behavioral expectations, those 3 questions. What does the leader expect of the team? What does the team expect of the leader? And then team member to team member, what do we expect of each other? The next foundational element is around constructive feedback. I have yet to meet somebody that gets excited about having to go out and provide feedback or gets excited about receiving feedback. And I want to share with you some tips on providing and receiving feedback around. One, be aware of the person's communication style preference. So again, if you're going to go interface with a relator, ask some questions about their family, how their weekend was, what have you, maybe one of their hobbies. Start building that relationship. If you're going to go interface with a driver, get direct, right to the point, because that's how they like to receive feedback. Do it privately. Don't do it in the conference room. Don't do it at the coffee pot. Do it privately, whether it's in your office or in an empty room. Do it in an environment that is conducive for one-on-one. And then be specific around it. And I like to use, this is a model I found very valuable. It's called the SBI model. Here's the situation. Here's the behavior that you're exhibiting. And then here's the impact on our business or the impact on our team. SBI, situation, behavior, impact. Next key component of providing feedback is it's got to be timely. It's got to be within 48 hours. You can't give feedback 7 to 14 days afterwards because the person's not going to remember what happened. So make sure it's timely. Focus on the situation, not on the person. Many times we take feedback personally. Feedback is designed to be a developmental tool, designed to make that person better, designed to correct that behavior around that. Allow for two-way communication. It can't be a one-way dialogue. Allow that person to ask questions, clarification. Perhaps they want to share with you a viewpoint or something around that. Let's talk about how you receive feedback. First, you got to listen. Don't interrupt. Don't argue. Don't get defensive. Again, this is developmental. It's about making the person better at what they're doing. Don't attempt to justify. Be aware of the communication preferences on your end as well. So if your leader's providing you the feedback or team members providing you feedback, flex, understand their communication style preference, and work with that. Clarify the intention of receiving that feedback. And then always thank that person. That person has taken the time to share feedback with you. They want to make you a better person within the organization. So thank them for taking the time because, again, they didn't wake up one morning and say, hey, I want to go out and provide feedback to everyone in my organization. They took the time, the effort, and the energy to want to make you a better person by providing that feedback. Next foundational element I want to talk about is around employee recognition. And if you've been on these webinars in the past, you know that I'm passionate about employee recognition because, unfortunately, what I see in many organizations is leaders are very quick to go out and provide feedback when things aren't going well. But what happens is when things are going well, when things are great, when the scorecard's all green, we are slow to provide recognition around that. And I want you to start thinking about building a culture of recognition in the organization. And we did earlier this year, back in July, we did an assessment of an organization down in Florida. And this quote jumped out at me from the assessment. They are real quick to tell you when you're doing something wrong. I can't remember the last time I received recognition. So let's start creating that culture of recognition. And recognition costs nothing. It's the intangible, the informal that our employees want. It's the handshake. It's the pat on the back. It's thank you for your hard work. We talked about what you did, how you stayed late on Friday to correct that problem, so when we came to work on Monday morning, everything was back in order. They don't need another trinket or another gift card. They just want that public, intangible, informal type of recognition. It's got to be sincere, it's got to be specific, and it's got to be meaningful. What I don't want to hear is, hey, great job. I want to hear, great job on correcting that problem. It was an issue for us, and what you did has really helped to impact our business. Is going to bring cost savings to us. Be very specific around that. Be timely. You know, if possible, within 48 hours, give that person maybe perhaps one-on-one recognition, and then in your team meeting, you can provide that public recognition. So others on the team are aware of what Andy has done to deserve that recognition. Recognition, it does not need to be measurable. What I mean by that is I've seen some organizations, they will put on scorecards the need to recognize 5 people a week or 5 people a month. And what happens is this. They look at their scorecard and say, it's Friday, I haven't recognized anybody yet, or it's the end of the month, I haven't recognized anybody. So the first 5 people they see, they recognize. And it may be something as, hey, thanks for coming to work today, or thanks for arriving early. Do not put recognition on your scorecard. I want recognition to be sincere, not something that's contrived because we're measuring it. Standard agenda item. We're going to talk about that in just on the next slide, and the pass it up. We're going to talk about that. This is a standard meeting agenda that when we talk about communication and the need to communicate face-to-face, two-way, and not advertising everything through email like many organizations do, I want recognition to be on every weekly home team meeting agenda, because it's a mental trigger that says, hey, I want to recognize so-and-so, or it may have been a bad week and we're not going to recognize anyone, and I'm okay with that. But at least have that mental trigger on your agenda. And then the next item you'll see is the pass up, pass down. Pass up, pass down is a bulletized briefing. What do we want everyone in our organization to know about? That cascades down, the pass down. But the pass up is where the recognition goes. If you've given someone recognition, pass it up to the folks higher in the organization so they see what's the good things that are happening on your team, and who are some of the high performers the last 2 weeks that got recognition, so then those leaders can seek them out, or when they see them in the hallway, say, hey, on the pass up we got from your team, I want to congratulate you on the recognition you did. Thanks for helping our organization advance the business forward. So put those 2 things on your agenda when it comes to recognition and the pass up, so that folks in your organization are aware of what's going on. People love receiving recognition, by the way. It makes them feel good, but then their coworkers, their team members see, what are the behaviors necessary that my leader, my manager, my organization is seeking to help move our business forward. Last foundational element is around the review process. You know, the assessment that we do, you know, confirms this paperwork drill. It's not a meaningful process. Frustration goes back to that tension and anxiety I talked about at the beginning. Very rarely is there follow-up on performance development plans. A performance development plan is laid out, and then it's forgotten, and next year comes around, and there's a new one. Many performance reviews lack data to back up the rating, and this tool that we teach in organizations, an action register, really becomes a performance management tool so that you can have data around that. And we've got an entire webinar on our website around the action register and the accountability analysis I'm about to show you. But the action, what someone wants to do, this is critical assignments and tasks. The owner is the person that's responsible for completing that. You got to put that target date in there. So now we've got a good snapshot of engagement within our teams, who's performing, who's doing what. And then 90 to 120 or 60 to 90 days later, I can take my action register for my team, and I can look at number of actions the person's taken or they've been asked to take, how many have they completed on time, and then the value to the business. So this becomes part of our performance review process. So when I go to give Shane a very excellent performance review and he gets a merit increase of 7%, say, I've got the data to back it up that I can say he's highly engaged. But then when I go to give the performance review to Anna, I've got data that says, Anna, you're not engaged, you're not an active participant in my team, and here's the data that shows that. So the performance, so the action register and the accountability analysis really becomes one data point along with a scorecard that helps us see who's engaged, who's an active participant. And also, I don't have to wait till the end of the year to the performance review to do this. This is good feedback right here. So now I can provide recognition to Shane, or I can provide feedback to Anna and Patricia and John that they need to step up and they need to become more engaged within our team on that. So the accountability analysis, very powerful tool. Connor, let's launch our third and final poll, please.
All right, about 10 more seconds. Okay, and this time around, Seth, a little bit more of what we would expect, a real good mix of all the answers, and there you go.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Connor. Let me wrap this up, folks. One, performance review process. I can't change how your performance review process is within your organization. You know, it's a piece of paper, a couple pieces of paper. But what I've done is given you some foundational elements to enhance that. And the first one is around the communication style preferences, understanding how people like to receive information and how people give information. The expectations, the behavioral expectations, focusing on what we have in common, not what we have in conflict, and having those expectations so everyone knows what's expected of them. And by the way, when you have those expectations in place, you're removing ignorance as an excuse because people agree to those expectations and they sign them. So no one can say, I didn't know that, no one told me. Have feedback process in place and use that SBI model. I talked about the situation, the behavior, the impact, public recognition. Be consistent around that. Start creating that culture of recognition within your organization. And then finally around that, collect meaningful data and leverage that. And utilizing the action register in the accountability analysis will help you do that. Connor, we got about 2 minutes left. Were there any questions that came in during our time together?
Absolutely. As always, lots of great questions. I think we've got time for about 2 right here, and the rest, as I mentioned in the beginning, if we don't get to yours, we'll contact you and get you answers by email or phone in the next day or 2. So, Seth, here's a really good one. When you were covering the topic of setting up expectations, we had a question come in about, what would you do if people simply don't follow through and they don't meet those expectations that they agreed to?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one I didn't get to. There's a 3-step process that I teach around when expectations are not being met. So if one of my peers is not meeting an expectation, it's incumbent upon me to point that out. And 8 out of 10 times, the first step is you go directly to that person not meeting the expectation. 8 out of 10 times, that will correct the behavior right there. So that's step number 1. Step number 2 is once you've had that one-on-one discussion and the expectation still not being met, then you bring it up at your team meeting. And you may say, hey, there's someone on our team not meeting one of our expectations. Because when you bring it up on the team meeting, now everybody on the team knows about it as well as the leader. And then step 3, which very rarely happens, it becomes a performance management discussion, and it's a one-on-one between the employee and the leader around that. It maybe becomes written warning, verbal warning, what have you, whatever your discipline process is. But 80% of the time, that one-on-one discussion will correct that behavior. One more, Connor?
Sure. Another person said here, our HR department insists that we use their standardized employee appraisal sheets and fill it out once a year. So would these tools replace that or work together with what HR is looking for?
No, as I said before, I can't change the piece of paper that the HR department utilizes. But what you can do is take these 5 elements I've shared with you, start incorporating them into the culture of your organization, start utilizing these so next year when the performance review process comes around, it's a much more meaningful exercise for not only the leader, but also for the employee around that. Folks, I want to thank you for your time today. In just a moment, Connor's going to launch an exit survey. Remember our Tuesday tips every Tuesday at 11 Eastern to come out. Next month, we're going to talk about business scorecards and best practices. And then also I wanted to point out in May, and we're finalizing the details, but in May we're going to have a workshop on process-based leadership and a tour of a fantastic organization that has really embraced this culture of accountability, of scorecards, and improved communication and trust. So I hope everyone has a great Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I look forward to being back with you in January. Have a great day.